All right. Good afternoon once again. We're going to try to expedite this and persecute the public business in a timely manner. We welcome you to the Griffin-Spalding County Board of Education work session. And at this time, we're going to ask that everyone, fine mind, place your electronic devices on either mute or turn them off as not to disturb the meeting. And I'm going to defer to our go-to person, Mr. Dawes, if he would lead us in a word of prayer, and then we'll go on into the pledge.
Let us pray. Father, Lord, we just thank you for this day. Lord, I'm so grateful and thankful for Griffin-Spalding County, for this school system, Father. Lord, we pray for your wisdom and direction, Lord, as we learn of new things and presentations today and the business that we do have to do. We pray for your wisdom and guidance in that. I thank you for that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you again, Mr. Dawes. We want to adopt the agenda as presented or with any addendums or corrections. Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adopt the agenda as presented.
We got a motion by Mr. Dawes. Can we get a second?
Second.
Got a second by Ms. McDonald. All in favor, show by raising your right hand. Let the record show that Ms. Cook has not arrived yet, and the vote is 4-0, one absent. All right, action items. Once again, we'll have tentative adoptions of the FY 2022 budget by Big Money Byron Jones.
Mr. Chair, I may have a different agenda. Mine had the consent agenda.
I think they gave us a revised.
Yes, sir. Is the consent next? Or we'll just skip it? Okay. That's fine.
So there's no consent agenda?
So,
We need to go back.
okay, hold on. Let make sure we're all on the same page.
The agenda that was in the original thing is wrong. We need to go by the one that was on the table today.
Yeah. And this one right here was what was in the package.
Wheeler, how you doing?
But this one.
Get your team straight, man.
Right. We're going by the one.
On the table.
If you look at the top left, it was printed 5/18/2021 at 8:16 a.m.
That's the new one.
Everybody got that?
Yes.
That's
So
what
is the
we're
consent
doing.
agenda next?
Right.
Okay.
All right, everybody straight? Go
Good.
ahead, Mr. Jones.
I got some pennies
So-
in my pocket for big money if you want to borrow some.
Hold on one second, Mr. Byron. I'm looking, and I guess we want to go through. I think they had it printed out on the first agenda, the consent agenda items, and we want to go through them, make sure any board member doesn't have any comments or anything of that nature. And board members, you'll see up on the human resource personnel actions, you'll see the categories. But I think in particular, Mr. Simmons is particularly talking about a couple of items on there. Right, yeah.
So would you like a motion for the accepting the consent agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, so moved.
we're on the same page now. So we need to, Mr. Dawes has given us a motion for the consent agenda, which was kind of an oversight, the way it was written at first. We got a motion to accept the consent agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
We got a second. Are there any discussions under the items on the consent agenda? If you look on the first agenda, those items that was embedded under the consent agenda, they are printed out on the first agenda. And that's what we want to allow board members to make any comments or whatever, if they do have any. Board members?
Good.
I have none, sir.
Okay, well, I do. I'll take this opportunity on the one that has been upon a lot of public scrutiny, which is the recommendation of the Griffin High School football coach by Mr. Simmons and with his assistant from Mr. Chambers, the newly appointed principal at Griffin High. And I want to make my comments publicly so people would know in my district and in the community where I stand and why I stand on this recommendation. That is, the board member were able to have conversation about this subject. And we talked with Mr. Simmons. I have talked with board members and number of people in the community. And my answer to them is the same that I'm going to give you right now is I may not be in agreement on the person, the personnel that is being recommended, but I am trusting our superintendent and our newly appointed principal at Griffin High because I don't have a reason not to trust them. I wasn't intricately involved in the interviews or discussions that may have been had, so all I know is what I know from the past. And as we know, sometimes you just leave the past in the past. And I'm trusting our superintendent, and I'm trusting our newly appointed principal at Griffin High, and I'm voting in affirmative on these recommendations and all others that are under the consent agenda that we're about to vote on. So I just wanted to make that clear and make that known to all those in the public. With that being said, can we call for the question? All in favor? 4-0, without Ms. Cook being present. Thank you, board members. Now, Mr. Jones, I know your legs tired, now the knees about to give out, right?
I'm not going to comment on that one. Before I get started, it's an honor to have Robert sitting here because he doesn't know that you've asked me 3 times about seeing him walking down the street after our meeting, balancing his budget. So, but anyway, the purpose of being up here this evening is just to ask for your, superintendent will be asking for your recommendation and approval of the FY22 budget with appropriations as stated earlier in our presentations for general fund, special revenue fund, school nutrition fund, debt service fund, and capital projects fund. So just as a reminder, we have to have an adopted budget officially before July 1, and you'll have that June 15th. After tonight, we'll run this tentative budget in the newspaper, Griffin News, on Friday. And then, you know, if there's any more suggestions from the board through the superintendent to myself, whatever, we can make that before the final adoption. So that being said, we do ask for your recommendation as stated earlier.
Right. Board members, you've heard from Mr. Jones, and you heard from him earlier in the public hearing. Are there any questions that you may have of him at this time? None. With that being said, can we get a motion to accept the tentatively adopt the 2022 budget?
So moved.
Got a motion? Get a second?
Second.
Got a second. All in favor, show by raising your right hand. 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Next, Mastery Connect by Ms. Michelle Jones.
Mr. Chair, could we just let it be publicly known that the vote 4-0 is because Ms. Cook is not here.
Ms. Cook, thank you, Ms. McDonald. She mentioned that we need to let it be known that the vote was 4-0 because Ms. Cook is not presently here, and we want to make sure Jonathan put it in the paper correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Jones.
Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to y'all today. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
I'm actually here requesting approval for the renewal of several assessment contracts, so of course I'm going to cover them one by one, but that's kind of the lump group together this afternoon. So the first one is going to be seeking the approval or the renewal to approve the contract with Mastery Connect. Mastery Connect has been in the district for 5 years. It's really our assessment platform where we administer district assessments. Teachers have the ability to develop their own assessments, so there's some school autonomy processes in place with that, and also provides robust reporting to be able to do different parts of instructional modifications and things like that. It's something that we've used multiple years, but obviously if there's any questions, I would welcome them at this time. Okay. All right, if there are no questions, I'm requesting approval to renew the Mastery Connect contract for the 2021-2022 school year.
Any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that Mastery Connect, we know, is an excellent resource that gives not only our teachers the ability to come up with formative and benchmark assessments, as well as be able to collaborate with curriculum and plan effectively for our scholars. And so I am in full support of this resource and would like to make a motion for it to be approved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. If there are no further questions or comments, can we get a motion to accept Mastery Connect?
I just made the chair, Mr. Motion.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Second, please.
Second.
Got a second? All in favor? Show it by hand. 4-0 with Ms. Cook being absent.
Before I go on to the next request, actually Mastery Connect reached out to Griffin-Spalding today to see if we would be interested in providing our use of the process within the district with some other schools that are looking at it. So we have a great working relationship with them, so I'm glad we're able to continue that as well.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The second request for approval is the purchase of AP exams from College Board. As you know, AP classes are a great opportunity for our students to earn college credits while they're in high school. The district pays for the AP exams for those particular students, and so I'm requesting the funds for that process. But before we get into that, do y'all have any questions about how that might look?
Just roughly how many, if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
roughly how many scholars take the AP exam?
It varies based on the school and the courses. Last year, we had 357 exams in total that were administered.
Do you see that increasing?
Yes, sir. We've seen an increase in that.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions about AP?
None at this time. Can we get a motion to accept AP exams?
Motion.
Got a motion? Can we get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dawes. All in favor? 4-0 with Ms. Cook being absent.
All right. Now
Oh,
for the.
man, you the show today.
I'm just,
Go.
we're
Wow.
rocking. We're rocking,
Work
Mr.
it.
Holmes.
Work it.
Okay, so my final request is for the approval of the renewal of the contract with NWEA, which is our MAP assessment. As you know, MAP has been in place for many, many years, actually since 2016, 2017. It's an assessment that's administered 3 times a year for our students. It's a predictor of milestones, performance. It's very much at this point embedded in the processes within Griffin-Spalding. We had about 60% of our schools that used MAP goals as part of their school improvement planning this year. So it's something that's very, very embedded in normal processes. Does anyone have questions about MAP or the renewal?
Ms. Sue, I know you got a question.
Actually, I don't. I'm good.
No? Okay.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we
Go ahead.
accept the approval or approve the,
All right.
I just wanted to say that any resource that is going to be able to drive student achievement is definitely something that we all should be in favor of. And as a certificated educator myself, have used map testing, and we know that, gives teachers and instructional leaders the opportunity to be able to obtain measurable achievement data for our scholars, which then allows them to be able to target each student's progress, and like she said, is an indicator of how they would possibly do on the milestones test. And so definitely I am in favor. So I think Mr. Doss' motion, and I would like to make a second for that.
All right, we got a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? 4-0 with Ms. Cook being absent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Stephanie Dobbins, budget renewal, frontline technology.
Hi, Ms. Dobbins. Welcome
Hey,
back.
Mr. Brown, thank you. I am excited to be back with you guys today. I have been watching meetings virtually, but I'm glad to be here in person.
Amen.
So the first item that I am presenting on is the renewal of Frontline Technologies. We have been using Frontline products for 20 years. What you're probably most familiar with is what we call ASOP, which is our sub-finder program, how we track leave and that type of thing. But other portions of the Frontline products include applicant tracking, which is how we get our applications, and principals have access in real time to all of that information. We are phasing in Frontline Central, which is how we were able to issue electronic contracts for the first time this school year. And so we were excited about that. And this spring, we have implemented 100% electronic employee onboarding with their paperwork and things. So the superintendent would like to recommend that the board approve the renewal of Frontline Technologies for $66,921, and that would be paid from the general fund.
All right, board members, you've heard the recommendation and the cost. Can we get a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion, can we get a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second, all in favor? 4-0 with Ms. Cook being absent. Thank you, Ms. Dobbins.
Thank you. The next item that I would like to present is the contract renewal for Knowledge Resources Group and Intelage. Those two companies work with us on the placement of foreign teachers. And so when we exhaust our applicant pools, sometimes it is necessary to look at credentialed teachers from outside the U.S. And we currently have 3 teachers working with us this year, but we have utilized these resources since 2016. And so we've had some effective teachers through those programs. Principals do interview and hire. This is not something that we place with them. The principals are in control of that decision. So it is recommended that the Board of Education authorize the superintendent to continue working with Intelage and KRG for the next school year.
Okay. So Ms. Dobbins, I was looking up under the background information, and I wanted to ask, so with the placement fees charged by Interlard and that KRG fee, of how does that work?
Basically, there are 2 different ways that it works, and it has to do with the type of visas that the teachers work under through each of the programs. Mm-hmm. With Intelage, they are paid through our payroll processes, so we earn T&E credit for them, just like all of our other teachers. And so that fee is $9,500 per teacher. With Knowledge Resource Group, they are considered employed through that third-party contractor. So we pay the contractor the regular teacher salary. The benefits are not paid by us. They're paid through Knowledge Resources Group. So there is a cost savings there, which is a trade-off for the cost of benefits trade-off for that fee. but we do not earn T&E credits for them because they're not actually our employee, they're a third-party contractor.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you, Ms. Dobbins. Board member, you've heard from Ms. Dobbins and the recommendation. Can we get a motion, please?
So moved.
Got a motion, can we get a second?
Second.
All right, y'all gonna be the appointed motion in second. All in favor, raise your right hand. 4-0 with Ms. Cook being absent.
Thank you.
Next up, under the subject of bipolar ionization, Anthony Akins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members, Mr. Simmons. I come to you tonight with a continuation of our efforts for mitigation for COVID as well as other infectious diseases and things that we could possibly incur. We had the bottle refill stations previously. Now, as one of the mitigations recommended is ventilation for schools. We would like to install the needlepoint bipolar units in schools. Since 2014, we have been utilizing these and installing them when we had renovations. So currently, we have 8 schools that already have them.
8.
And working on the other schools as well as central office. We're already using the higher MERV ratings on our filters. We've done a good job with ventilation, but we definitely think this would add to what we're trying to do. We put out proposals, requests for proposals. We received 6 back on April 30th. And with that, the lowest bid came from Sweatman Mechanical Services in the amount of $228,894.18. So we would like to move forward with them. We're also asking for a 15% contingency to be added to that cost in order to handle central office as well, because the bids that were placed were for schools. But we'd like to do that as well. But I would like to point out that the bid by Sweatman plus the 15% still comes in under the next lowest bidder. One other caveat there is that Sweatman says that they can have these installed before we start back in August. So that is a caveat there. So with that being said, the superintendent recommends that a purchase order be issued to Sweatman Mechanical Services for $228,894.18 for the base bid and bonds cost, and 15% contingency be allowed to cover changes and additions at central office.
Just have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
As we move along and we do this current central office, can this equipment, once this is updated and refurbished a bit, will we still be able to use this equipment in the refurb of this building? Or
We should be able to, yes, ma'am, because this is just an addition to the unit on the inside that's removable and could be used in another.
Okay, very good. Is Sweatman local?
I do not think so, no, ma'am.
Okay. That's pretty cool, though. They can get it done prior to school starting this fall. That's awesome. Thank you.
They submitted plans for that to happen, so we're encouraged by that.
Me too.
All right, any other questions? With that being said, can we get a motion to accept the recommendation?
So
Motion.
moved.
So moved.
That was
Did
a
Mr.
second,
Brown
that was
say
a
something?
motion or a second over there.
Okay, so you second. He motioned and you second.
Okay.
All right, all in favor, raise your right hand.
However you want it, Mr. Chair.
4-0 with Ms. Cook being absent. Mr. Aiken, you know I held my mule by not saying anything about bipolar.
Well, I made that statement walking up here that I'm not sure I want to be associated with that term, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, board member. Next up, we got presentations and discussions. First up is Ms. Stephanie Dobbins again on leader evaluation appeal.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
What you have is a regulation that was developed in response to your request after we presented the teacher evaluation appeals policy. And it is modeled after that policy. What I want to point out is that we are bringing this to you as a regulation attached to an existing policy for staff evaluations. And the reason that we've come back with it this way is because there is not an existing codification to tie it to. We reached out to GSBA for guidance on that. And in fact, I think in full disclosure, you need to know that they advised us not to develop a policy regarding this because it is creating rights that haven't been legislated. So I did want to share that information with you. But what we have done is modeled it after what we came forward with your feedback for teacher evaluation appeals.
I think this was a subject that you brought up. You have any comments on?
Yeah, why would they suggest not to have a regulation or policy regarding?
Because it's creating rights that don't have a basis outside of just the board. So
So what you're saying is the teacher one has state law that is put into
Correct.
effect that it's being based off of.
Correct.
And so the leader one does not have
Correct.
state law.
But it still gives our leaders the opportunity to know that in the event that they feel they're unhappy with their particular evaluation, that they can appeal.
it does.
My question would be to legal counsel, is there any issues that you see with us creating that?
The advice given by GSBA is sound advice. It's very conservative legal advice. But the board has, basically as a matter of policy, said this is a right that you want to confer to our employees. So all it means is that it's saying that we're going to confer this right that you can't get. If you go through the code, you go through Title 20, they don't have this right of appeal. But we're going to give our employees that right of appeal, and once we adopt it, it becomes law as far as the board's concerned, and we're required by law to provide the appeal. Now, I probably made that about clear as mud.
That's fine. That helps me.
Before
And so
we,
this will become before us in June?
No, sir, this is a regulation.
I got you.
And so we're sharing back with you that we have followed through on your request. And so we'll be working to implement this regulation this year, but because it's not a policy, it's been reviewed by cabinet. I wanted you to see what we've developed, and it is modeled strictly after the one that has been presented for teachers. And so it's an FYI, we are doing what you asked.
Awesome.
All right,
I'm
thank
good with
you.
that.
Ms. Dobbins, I just had one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed that the teacher goes into effect July 1. Why does this one only go into effect on August 1?
I was just allowing more time for training, because it doesn't really apply until the end of the year because it's an appeal of a summative evaluation.
Sure.
So,
Good answer. Thanks.
thank you.
I got it. Thank you.
Mr. Simmons, you have any comments on this?
I do not, I'm fine.
Okay, all right. Next up, we have
Gotta make a motion. You gotta make a motion, right?
No, that's not an action.
It's
Oh,
just
not action? Okay.
That's all. Next up, we have a community eligibility provision overview by Mr. Robert Wheeler. I don't see him with his crying towel, so he must be okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Holmes.
Good
board-
afternoon.
Board members and Mr. Simmons. All right, our mission statement is to empower students to graduate college and career ready. And our non-negotiables is to be professional, to be accountable, and communicate effectively. And this is our GSC strategy map. Community eligibility provision. We are familiar in this district with provisions. We have provision 2 in Ansbury, Atkinson, and Moore, and the benefit that they are for those schools and reimbursements. So community eligibility provision is much like that, in that it is a non-pricing meal service option for schools and school districts in low-income areas. So how does it help us? The way it helps us is that all meals are served at no cost to all students. It takes away the stigma of eating lunch in the cafeterias. You must need it, those kinds of things. It takes away a bullying aspect. There's no need for meal applications, so we don't have the cost of trying to print, making errors on those meal applications in the process. No charges to students. In other words, we don't have to collect money at the end of the year to pay for charges that have been accumulated through students who may not have the money to pay for their meals during the year. So no more charges. No more price increases to student meals. We are about 60 cents less than what we should be charging based on a paid lunch equity report, where we have to meet the cost of the meals. We won't have a need for price increases because we won't have a cost to our meals. Greater reimbursements and improved participation, they work together. The reimbursement for CEP is based on a paid rate and a free rate. And in this district, we have a greater free rate in both group settings, and therefore then a participation increase. And we're kind of seeing that with our seamless summer right now. The meals are at no cost. We're getting participation from all of our students. And then financial sustainability. With greater reimbursements, school nutrition is able to pay its bills, take care of its expenses. So what are the requirements? The requirements are that the LEA, the local education agency, must have 40% identified students based on enrollment. Now, this is not the same as the percentage of students eligible for free or reduced price meals. It's an identified students. Identified students are classified these ways. Those are students that can qualify for free or reduced price meals, for free meals without an application. They are either directly certified or they're categorically eligible. And the categories are SNAP, TANF, and FDPIR is Food Distribution Programs on Entering Reserves. We don't have any of those in this state. We have homeless, runaway migrant, Head Start, and Even Start programs. Okay. Now, so the minimum requirement is 40%. And we have two groups, and the reason it's labeled Group A and Group C is not that we didn't have a Group B, but the way that the worksheet was designed, there was not enough spaces to put the 14 schools. So our first group has 2,389 students in that group. As of May 3rd, they have a 41.61% identified students, which gives that group a claim percentage of 66.57 free. And what that is, for every 100 students, we take that 66.57 and multiply it times the number of students and get the free full reimbursement rate. That's what I mean by increased reimbursement. Then on Group C, which is the majority of our district, is 7,263 students and almost 100% claim percent, 98.03%. And if you look at the models that we have with Ansbury, Atkinson, and Moore, we will have more reimbursements coming in because the students start to know that lunch and breakfast are free. They're going to be used to it for 2 years with the Seamless Summer Program. It's a win-win. So what's the bottom line? All students at all schools in Griffin-Spalding County schools can eat school breakfast, school lunch, and after-school snacks at no cost. No No more collecting charges, and it's a pathway to financial sustainability through increased federal reimbursements. That's the bottom line. Any questions?
Where have you been?
What, is there any provisions, just asking, don't ask, you don't know. Are there any provisions for staff to be included or?
The National School Lunch Program is for students 18 and under, enrolled students. So meals at no cost to staff is not a purpose of the National School Lunch Program.
Well, I've just,
Good
I know that question will come up, so.
Yes, sir.
He just wanted it when he visits.
I was, I can walk across the street pretty much every day and get a lunch.
That's right.
That's all right. If that was, but I just know somebody's gonna ask that question. So I just wanted to make sure we do know the answer to that question.
There you go. Mr. Wheeler, good afternoon.
All right, say that louder, man, say it again. Thank you, Mr. Aiken. Thank you,
How are you?
for that
So
presentation.
is this, I think all of you in the room know this is a passion of mine, because as an educator, I saw, you mentioned bullying. I saw those alternative meals being given out, which were pretty, in my eye, pretty worthless, so to speak. Do we qualify for this yearly, academic year? Will we have to requalify next year? Do we requalify every semester? How does that work?
The 21-22 school term will be under seamless summer options as we are now.
Yes,
that
because
is
of the
extended.
USDA waivers.
Right. So this provision will start in 22 through the next 3 years.
22, 23.
Right. This is a 4-year platform from which you qualify, and then at times, because of this past year, because of the pandemic, they were allowed to extend 1 year. But this will be renewed, just as any other provision is renewed, at the status of the students that are enrolled.
And it is my understanding that this next school year, when we start in the fall, that all of our students in all of our schools will get, everyone will qualify for everyone will qualify for breakfast and lunch at no cost. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And this summer, we're still going to give out meals like we have been since the pandemic. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Absolutely. Man, that just made my day. That is so awesome. I got cold chills.
And I think that from a historical perspective, that one of Georgia's native sons, Richard B. Russell, in 1946, who's known as the father of school lunch, who represented Georgia distinguishedly not only as the youngest state representative, but the youngest governor, and as well as one of the youngest people in United States Congress serving in the United States Senate. So to see that this is happening in our district at this time is a really good thing, and just want to give that Georgia Studies plug.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. That's, wow,
Seems like Mr. Akins has a comment.
that's awesome.
I just want to follow up on your summer feeding. Summer feeding will not be like we did last year during the pandemic, but it will revert back to the seamless summer. So we will have more sites. We will be using our sites that are having summer school. And I believe we have 5 exterior sites that we work with, Parks and Rec, Ambuck, City Park. I think we're doing Southampton Mobile Home Park. And that'll be a daily thing instead of multiple acts. So I just want to make sure that you knew we were going back to the normal seamless.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mr. Akins. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Wow, that's awesome.
Awesome.
Anything? Okay, thank you, Ms. Wheeler. Next up, we have Dr. Norman Sauce, Griffin-Spalding County School return student to Griffin-Spalding School campaign and pre-K registration.
Thank you, appreciate that. Good afternoon, Chairman Holmes, board members, Superintendent Mr. Simmons. Again, I'm Norman Sauce, Executive Director of Elementary Education. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon to update the board and the public on our return students to GSCS campaign efforts, as well as an update on pre-K registration. As always, we begin our presentations with a reminder of our organization's mission, which is to empower students to graduate college and career ready. Our vision is that the Griffin-Spalding County School System is to be an agent of change, transforming our students into future-ready learners and contributing members of society. We have 3 non-negotiables that govern our work, and that is that we will all be professional, we will be accountable, and we will communicate effectively so that our stakeholders are informed and aware of what we expect and how we operate. We have our strategy map, which on the far left details the objectives, the strategic objectives of our work here in the district, beginning with having a high-performing staff, leading towards organizational effectiveness, leading towards family and community engagement, which ultimately leads towards improved student performance. And you have the various activities contained within those buckets on the strategy map. If you would, okay, thank you for that. Okay, this slide here, which I believe the board should also have in your packet, which I know isn't entirely clear on the screen, but I'll make some sense of these numbers and also highlight a few of the figures. Firstly, what you have on the screen here is the number of students by school and by reason who have withdrawn from the Griffin-Spalding County school system this school year. In particular, there are some date ranges that are on this chart, and that is from the dates of August 1st, 2020 through March 30th of 2021. Early April is when we began this work in earnest to really dive deep into the data, understand who's left, where they went, where they left from, and then to engage some of the activities that I'll talk about in a few minutes to try to reconnect with some of these folks as best we can. But this chart here on my left gives you in descending order by school in the Griffin-Spalding County school system and by number of withdrawals that we've had this school year, again, up through March 30th. Now, the total figure for that date range is 1,387. And forgive me for a moment, I'm going to open up to the same data on my documents so that I can see a little bit more clearly. So that total number is 1,387. And to be clear for the board, that's the number of students that would have withdrawn for any reason during that date range. Again, August 1st to March 30th. And again, it tells you where they left from. So no surprise probably to many that the 2 comprehensive high schools in our district, which are the 2 largest schools in our district, had the 2 highest individual figures of students who withdrew. You see Griffin High was 156, Spalding High 128, so on and so forth in descending order. So that 1,387 represents 100%, and then the percentages that you see next to the individual school names represent the percentage of that 1,387. Now from there, the chart on the right tells you what we know about where these students went. Now that is not a why necessarily, it's a where. I want to be clear on the difference. It's not necessarily a why, it's a where. So for example, this column here that I'm highlighting tells you of the students that left, this is how many that now attend a private school, a home school, or some non-GSCS virtual school. So in other words, some sort of choice option that did not necessarily involve moving a physical address. Some may have moved a physical address, but for the folks, the children in this column, we now know that they attend some sort of choice option, virtual school, home school, or private school. This column here tells us the number of students, again by grade level, who now attend a public school within our Griffin-RISA. And our Griffin-RISA, as a reminder, those are our local school districts that are very close to us geographically that we work with through Griffin-RISA. I'm speaking specifically of Fayette, Pike, Butts, Lamar, Upson, Henry, Newton, and of course Griffin-Spalding. So these are the students who withdrew from GSCS and now attend, to the best of our knowledge, a public school within our neighboring RISA districts. And then finally, on the right here, those that moved outside of our Griffin-RISA, and that runs the gamut of North Georgia, Central Georgia, South Georgia, Alabama, Virginia, even some Californias and some Pennsylvanias in there. There's even some out of the country. There's some China, there's some Mexico, there's some Puerto Rico. So it really runs the gamut of all scenarios of completely leaving the area, okay? Now, percentage-wise, I'll draw the attention's board here. 25%, so 1 out of 4 of those that left, we know now attend some sort of choice option and did not necessarily, and in most cases, did not physically move their address. Again, private school, homeschool, or some other virtual school that's not a GSCS affiliate. 42% of that number left the area. Excuse me, left the district but did not leave the area. They went somewhere nearby geographically, and 32% moved out of the area completely. Now, I'll invite Mr. Harper, if you would, to the next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
The other one, can you go back just 1 second so I can read it?
Sorry about that, Mr. Doss.
Other
Yep.
ones attending public school within the Griffin RESA, is there the ability to still be living in Griffin-Spalding and attending elsewhere, or did they more than likely have to move?
It's a good question. The most abundant scenario related to your question is moving addresses. However, there are some scenarios in the data where employees of ours that don't live in Spalding County, whose children attended our schools because they can as employees, withdrew their children from our district to go to schools in the district where they live. And Henry and Pike were the two most abundant of those examples. So that's the majority of that scenario, that's what it was. Great question, Mr. Doss. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harper. So I'll spend less time on this data. It's presented in the very same manner, but I'll highlight a few points here. This data is from the 2019-2020 school year, so it gives you some historical context from a year ago. Same time frame, just so we can do an apples-to-apples comparison, August 1st, 2019 to March 30th, 2020. You'll notice that the total composite number a year ago was 1,356 students that withdrew during that time frame, roughly 30 less than was the case this year. What are some interesting differences is if you just go to this row here, you'll see some percentage differences. And particularly what I mean is, so last year, 20% rather than 25 left our district to attend some sort of private school, homeschool, or non-GSCS virtual school. Last year, 33% rather than this year's 42 left to attend a public school within our RESA. And last year, 39% rather than this year's, rather than this year's 42, left the area, completely moved out of the area. And then there is an 8% from last year that we just never got reliable data of where they went. So those are some percentage differences. And quickly, Mr. Harper, if you would, to the next slide, just one more slide of historical, no, go back, one more. There you go. 2019 school year. That year it was 1,525, I believe, that left the district. Keep in mind our enrollment was higher 2 years ago, as y'all are well aware. And those percentages down the bottom, 21% left at that time to attend a private school, homeschool, or non-GSCS school. 31% at that time left to attend a public school within our RESA. 38% at that time moved out of the RESA altogether. And 10% at that time, we never got reliable data as to where they went. So I wanted to give the board and the public some historical context. I do next want to talk about some next steps, but is there any more questions about the data or the information as it's presented that I can address? Okay. Mr. Holmes?
Dr. Sauce, you know,
Yes, sir.
we've been kind of focusing, for lack of a better term, tunnel vision on students that left the district. Do we have any data on students that may have come into the district during this COVID episode?
It's a good question. That we can easily retrieve that data. That wasn't a part of the work of this committee,
yeah.
but it's data that can easily be had. So
I would be interested in. I don't want to put any more on your plate.
no worries. We can.
In your leisure time.
Sure, of course. We'll.
I would love to maybe lay eyes on that information.
Sure. I'll certainly get back to you on that, Mr. Holmes, and it wouldn't be too hard to retrieve. Thank you for the question.
Sir.
Yes, sir. So next, if you would, Mr. Harper, just want to update the board on, some conversation. We've had some in board meetings and just want to update the board entirely. So we have, in the last few months, began work to reconnect in various ways, or do our best to reconnect in various ways with families who have left us, to see what we can do to get some or encourage some to give us a chance again and come back and learn and discern why they may have left. So in summary, we've convened a discussion group of internal stakeholders involving school staff and central office staff to take some time analyzing this data, to collaborate our thinking and our problem-solving efforts to come up with some action steps to, again, reconnect and solicit input and understand why folks left and see how many we could get back and encourage to come back. Part of that work also included encouraging students who have been sparsely attending, especially in the virtual setting, to attend more regularly. If you would, Mr. Harper. With that, this discussion group I'm speaking of, amongst central office staff and school staff, came up with a total of 43 action steps that came up with 6 overarching categories, 43 action steps and 6 overarching categories. You have those listed there, but those include the creation of some broad information resources, ways that we can make direct family connections, and ways that we can solicit input and feedback, especially from those families that left us anonymously and directly, among other steps and categories. If you would, Mr. Harper. Some of those action steps include staff making direct calls to families of those students, who have withdrawn from our district to the best of our ability with the contact information that we have, the calls that can be made. That work has been underway for a few months now. Our school staff, and in some cases with assistance of central office, have taken the actual student-by-student information, contact information to actually make calls, and we're tracking the results of those calls at the central office level for us to have that qualitative data to be able to do more meaningful things with that information as those calls are made. There's plans in the near future, and I don't want to step on Mr. Pugh's team here as the communications department, but there are some plans in the near future, potentially for some GSCS community engagement events to hear directly from folks about this same topic. There are plans for some anonymous surveying of families, so get feedback anonymously in addition to the calls, as I mentioned, for them to give us anonymous feedback if they're willing, again, for us to understand the why, to then be able to do some more with that why. There's also plans for some marketing materials to be created through the communications department to be soon disseminated to those families through electronic means and mailing means, etc. Again, with that message in mind of trying to educate them on what we have to offer in GSCS and address the feedback that we receive about concerns or reasons why folks left, for us to inform those folks about what we're doing to respond to their concerns. So there's certainly more than that, but I just wanted to give a summary of those steps and of the data that you saw. I'll pause here to see if the board has other questions before I speak briefly to pre-K registrations.
Any questions?
I just have a comment. I'm just knowing personally that I don't have anything to compare it to, but I would have never dreamed that we had 1,400 students withdrawing from the system. The 3 years you have here, that's a high number. So I think what I'm trying to say is it just tells me that society is still very transient, pandemic or no.
Well, I don't want to give the wrong figure, but we know that we've had, pre-pandemic, we've had pretty high rates of transiency, not only folks leaving the district, but transferring internally within the district as well. Mm-hmm. So that's a condition that we've been aware of and sought to respond to in a variety of ways for a number of years. The pandemic has now encouraged some to more abundantly look outside the area as well, for whatever reasons.
Is there any feedback from just the general phone calls that principals and staffs are making from individual schools? Is it positive? Is it, I'm coming back if?
Yes, ma'am. So I don't want to dodge the question, Ms. McDonald. I'd prefer to be able to give you hard data when I have that.
I understand.
Right now, it's still underway. We're taking the comments that school staff are providing on master spreadsheets that we're then coding, and we can turn that into some real data and real numbers and percentages in the coming week or month to give you a more concrete answer to that question.
Sure.
But that's part of the process. Thank you for
so
asking.
much.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am. Any other thoughts or questions before I briefly discuss pre-K registrations? Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And then finally, for my time, just want to give the board an update on our pre-K registrations. Of course, pre-K registrations can often be a harbinger of enrollment trends to come in future years, obviously. But on the far right column here, far right, it gives an indication of our pre-K registrations as of May 10th, 2021 for the coming school year, the 2022 school year. I do want to just remind the board that you see an asterisk next to Beaverbrook Elementary School as Beaverbrook is the only school in our district that has one pre-K class instead of two. So that's one of the reasons why you see smaller figures there historically. But nevertheless, as of May 10th, 2021, we had 301 total registrations for pre-K for next year. That's a week ago, so I'm getting updates on this about every 7 to 10 days. So soon I'll know more about where we are since May 10th. I will share that between May 1st and May 10th, we had about 60-ish registrations. And within that window, of course, we shared with the public what our plans were for next year. So we did see a pretty discernible uptick since that information was shared. We were just below 240 about 2 weeks ago, and now we're up over 300, and that's as of May 10th. So we may even be higher than that since May 10th. You'll see here in green, the column to the immediate left, this is last school year. Now it says August 1st rather than a date in May, because I'll remind folks that we did pause registration efforts due to the pandemic and the closure. We didn't resume again until July, so we chose the August 1st date rather than the May date. But you'll see that we're actually slightly ahead by 3 where we were last August. It was 298 last August. And then for more historical context, early May of 2019, we were at 360. Early May of 2018, we were at 394. Just be reminded that our overall enrollment has declined by several hundred since the days of 2018 as well. So it's not as if pre-K was showing a reduction, whereas other grade levels weren't. So just want to give that context as well.
And the
But
norm-
those are some figures as they currently stand. Sorry, Ms. McDonald.
That's
Go
okay,
ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. The
No, ma'am.
norm for pre-K, as I recall, is between the 340-ish, 345, as I recall?
The max capacity?
No, the norm that we have had in the past is 340-ish. Do I remember you saying that?
The last number of years, we've been in the high 300s.
Okay.
Actually, a little higher, not 380, 390. We've been
Okay.
consistently in the high 390s. So it's been a little higher than 340s, 380s, 390s.
Good, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions or anything else I can address or assist the board with related to this data?
That was telling. Thank you so much. This is it's good info to have. Thank you so much.
Sure. My pleasure. Appreciate the opportunity to speak and share this with y'all.
Thank you, Dr. Sauce. Yes, sir. Next, we have,
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
if I-
sir.
If I can ask just a quick question. There was discussion about possibly amending the agenda for the van situation. Did that get put into the van?
Van?
Did that get put into the
I
consent
think
agenda?
I think that was in the, let me see.
Or do we need to deal with that?
Yeah, I
as an
saw that
action item?
somewhere. I think that was in the consent agenda.
It was not in the consent
Not,
agenda.
Ms. Ray says it was not.
it was not? Okay. Thank you for catching that, Mr. Dawes.
I just didn't know if you wanted to regress and take care of that before we missed
Yeah,
it.
we need to take care of that.
So I would make a motion.
I saw a document with Mr. Aiken's name on it.
Yes,
about-
sir.
about
It's in that packet. I was
yeah.
just going to make a motion to amend the agenda to add the maintenance department replacement van to the action item.
Okay. Thank you for catching that. Let me get, so can I find that document?
I'll second it.
We can take care of that. Yeah, here it goes. All right. Mr. Dawes has made a motion to amend the agenda to add the replacement van for the maintenance department to the action items section. Mr. Brown has seconded. All in favor, show by raising the right hand. Okay, we'll digress back to the action item, and we'll address this item. Could we get a motion to approve the recommendation that was presented by, to us by Mr. Akins and supported by the superintendent for a cost of $28,795 from Marietta Truck Sales to purchase a van. I think I see some documentation in here with a, it has a drop-down TV monitor, CD player. Y'all see that?
Sounds like your van.
Can I get a motion?
He motioned already.
I motion and he seconded.
Motion, he second. All in favor, Somebody raise their right hand. 4-0 with Ms. Cook not present.
think we just voted on it twice.
We did.
We used to vote on it like 10 times.
Okay, we have voting districts by Mr. Tim Shepherd.
Mr. Chairman, I spoke to the board briefly last week, just to inform the board that this was an issue that we were going to need to start addressing. And at that time, I told you that Jim Fortune, who's the county attorney, and I had a conference call scheduled for the next morning with a person by the name of John McKenzie, who was with FLO Analytics. And that's a national firm that helps out local governments and school districts with redistricting or reapportionment issues. And they also, I talked to him today too, and he said it helps out school districts on redrawing attendance zones too. But I want to point out one thing here. I'm going to start using the word reapportionment rather than redistricting. The reason why is that when we say redistricting, people start panicking and think that we're about to redraw their elementary school attendance lines or whatever. And I just want to emphasize that we are absolutely not, capital N-O-T, not looking at redrawing school attendance zones. What we are looking at doing is something that's required of every governmental entity in the United States every 10 years in response to the census. And that is to look at reapportionment or redrawing district voting lines. Here, y'all are each elected from 5 single-member districts, and it will require looking at the difference between the 2010 census and the 2020 census to see if there's any adjustment required to your voting district. I gave you, and the county's got to do the same thing, and for those who may be listening that were not listening last week, the voting districts for the school board and the voting districts for the county are identical. Give you a brief history on that. Back between the 2000 and the 2010 census, our school district went from a 10-member board that was elected from 10 single-member districts to a 5-member board, and that was done in response to a referendum that was put to the voters. And part of that referendum was that the 5 school districts would be identical to the 5 county commission districts. There's no legal requirement that continue. I personally think that we do a service to the voters of Spalding County if we can work real hard to let that carry over after reapportionment, because it sure cuts down on confusion with the voters on what district they're in and who they're voting for. I gave you a proposed procedures and format. The emphasis on the word proposed. And I drafted that before I received the proposal from FLO Analytics, which you have a copy of too. I got that by email last night about 8:30. Briefly running through it, and it pretty much goes along with what we did 10 years ago when we did the reapportionment. The first meeting would be a joint meeting between the school board and the county board. And it would be a Q&A session and an orientation. If we hired FLO Analytics, they would either have somebody come in person or do it virtually. If we're looking to save a little money, we'd probably want them to do it virtually. And then they would obtain the census data. Actually, talking with John McKenzie today, he said they would already have the census data when they did that, but they would also solicit any input from board members as far as their desires for their own districts. FLO Analytics would then prepare 3 to 4 proposed district maps, and they would present that at a second joint meeting between the school board and the county commission, assuming the county agrees to hire FLO Analytics. And then after that, each board, and of course we're focused on our board, we would have a public hearing to solicit public input on the proposed new voting districts if we have to move the lines, and it's probably a 98% chance we're going to have to move them some. And then after that, the board would adopt the new district map, and we would send that to our legislative delegation to be enacted. All right. On the timetable, I thought that we already had the preliminary census numbers. We don't. It's been delayed because of COVID. Mr. McKenzie tells me that the legacy census data, which is the preliminary data, will be released by the state on August the 13th. And then the finalized data, which they refer to as the standard data, will not be released until September 30th. So they would not really be able to do anything until after September 30th. Their proposed contract, again, which you have a copy of, and I just gave it to you tonight so you have a chance to look at it. It proposes that if we hired them, they would start work no later than 30 days after they've received the census data. You may say, well, we're talking about end of September now. Why are we talking about it in May? The best that I can tell, there are no consultants working in the state of Georgia to help local governments with their reapportionment issues. Every school district, every county, not to mention the legislature, has got to go through this. So it is very much a seller's market if you're in the business of helping out local governments redraw these districts. So I'd like for us to get ahead of the curve, and if y'all are amenable to hiring somebody like FLO Analytics to help, it would be nice to go ahead and jump on this and hopefully maybe take action in June if we could. I talked to Jimmy Fortune again today, and he's going to be taking this to the county commission. I have checked around to some surrounding school districts, and they're really not looking at it yet. I mean, so again, I'd rather go ahead and let's act on this before everybody else jumps in and starts trying to hire folks, and so we can get it lined up and get it done. Oh, just by the way, this may be of interest to you. We do have the preliminary, very preliminary census figures for Spalding County. We grew.
Mr. Shepherd, can you speak into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. We grew by 5.2% from the last census. We went from 64,073 countywide to 67,414, which is a net gain of 3,341 people.
A net gain of how much?
3,341 people. And I may end up being proven wrong, but I bet you The majority of that is in Ms. McDonald's district.
District 5.
Yeah.
Just
From the city.
the difference in Sun City in the last 10 years.
Have we been able to look to see what we paid 10 years ago?
I asked Byron, but y'all kind of had Mr. Jones a little bit busy in the last
Which is
week.
fine, I just,
The proposed cost is $24,730, and that would be divided by 2 if the county goes in with us. Now, it cost, this same outfit did it for the city of Brookhaven, and it cost them $33,000. So, depends on how much work we ask them to do in excess of the scope of work that they put in their proposal will determine how big a check we write.
Mr. Shepherd, I had sent a text out to the board members and the superintendent, but I forgot to add you on it, to make them aware, they're still grappling with this apartment complex out on 362 on Lennox Road. And that will affect attendance zone because they estimate each household to have, I don't know how they get a half a kid, but 1.5 kids. I'm still trying to figure that one out, but I know the county is aware because they are grappling with residents and this, I guess the city rezoned or what do you call it when they move it into the county?
Annex, thank you,
Annex, yeah,
somebody, thank you.
Thank you. And they were discussing it, grappling with it. So that's something we're gonna have to consider, because I think that Ms. Cook's district, and it affects 2 districts, like you said, whenever something like that happened. I think my district and I think maybe Mr. Dawes or Mr. Brown.
Well, now, actually, that will not come into play with the reapportionment. Our reapportionment will be based on the census figures from the 2020
So
census.
they're not gonna include that, but we're gonna have to deal with it.
Well, we may end up having to deal with it, and I hate to say this because somebody will grab it and start going nuts with it, but we may end up having to deal with considering redrawing attendance zones
Right.
if that all comes to fruition. But that's not what we're dealing with now. We're talking about strictly reapportionment of the voting districts, the 5 districts that the board members and then the county commissioners represent.
Yeah, and I agree with you to a degree, but those residents that are gonna be of voting age, it's gonna affect, I guess not, because if they're just in that district, they just vote. But I think mainly, my point was what the school system is gonna have to deal with is those students in that area, affecting the attendance at each school, so.
If they end up building the neighborhood that you're talking about, the subdivision that you're talking about, that would probably or most likely affect the 2030 census. But it will not affect what we're doing now as far as reapportioning the districts.
All right. Okay, any question, any other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd, for that update. I kind of agree. I just wanted to publicly state that I kind of agree with Mr. Shepherd, knowing that our resources are very slim
Yes.
in the state, that we work really diligently with the county to try to come to some agreement to, number one, get someone in place to do this work for us, and secondly, a partner to help us pay for it, because it's important work that needs to be done, but I certainly don't want to be in a position where we don't have anyone to help us.
And I guess along those lines, The board could choose not to hire a consultant and let the state reapportionment office do the work for us. I see Mr. Brown shaking his head. You're not gonna get the customer service if you do that. I guess it's the old saying, you get what you pay for. You're not gonna get the customer service that we would get if we hired a consultant. One other thing I left out of there, I'm sorry. One of the services that FLO would provide is access to a computer program. Once they come up with the preliminary districts based on the census data, you would all have access to a computer program where you can kind of play with the district lines and redraw your district. And for instance, if there's a particular neighborhood that you want to try to keep in your district or whatever, you can redraw the lines to see how far out of whack it would make things to try to help you, I guess for want of a better term, customize your district. So what I'm asking you to do is just between now and the next board meeting, take a look at the little outline I put together, take a look at the FLO analytics proposal, and again, I would love for us to be in a position to act on this in June so we can go ahead and get this nailed down.
Board members, just to add to what Mr. Shepherd has presented to us, I encourage each of you to reach out to your co-laborers, meaning your county commissioner, and have a discussion with them, which I've already done with my co-laborer in District 3. But this is something that Tim had mentioned, you know, Mrs. Meggers, if we had someone like that to go to, but they're far and few in between that does this kind of work. I'm thinking about coming out of retirement and start a firm to do it, because there are very few people across the country that does it. And this is something that cities and counties and whatnot will have to deal with on a regular, ongoing basis. But I just want to just plant that seed for you to reach out to your co-laborer in your district and just have a conversation with them, and you know, before we reach a point of having to make decisions on this. All right? Yes. Okay. Just make note in your package the seamless summer option extension. And also, I just want to make mention, I think Griffin High will have their honors program tonight in the auditorium at 6 o'clock, if you was not aware. And if there's no other information, I'd like to start to my right and give each board member an opportunity. We have one. Which one you got? Okay. All right, board members, before we do the board members' comment, also let you know we got 2 items. We thought we only had 1, but we got 2 items for executive session. Mr. Shepherd and I talked. I don't know what we need to categorize that on. You know, when I talk to you about board members meeting, attending meetings virtually or in person. Do we need to do that?
That's not really something to do in executive session.
Can we, that's what I was.
We'll need to address it.
We can address it, we can address it now. Let us digress and address it. What I had talked with Mr. Shepherd about, we need to make sure we all in compliance and on the same page, is, you know, we had the option of doing board members attending meetings virtually. We were doing it virtually, but that was mainly because of COVID. But now, if a board member is not able to be at a meeting, it is, for lack of a better term, I guess, deemed improper or not within the guidelines.
Violation of the Open Meetings
Violation,
Act.
yeah, and either you're here in person or you're not. That wasn't the purpose of having that virtual option. So going forward, we need to make everybody aware, make sure we all on the same page, that if you're not able to be here in person, since we have started back in-person meeting, either you're here or you're not. We won't be making those accommodations for virtual tapping.
I promise not to jump out of an airplane again.
All right,
Thank you for excusing me in those times.
Okay. Okay, so now, with that being put out on the table, we only have one item for executive session, evaluation of personnel, for the purpose of evaluating personnel. With that said, we'll start over here with Mr. Brown and work our way around for any comments that the board may have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the seniors that were recognized and celebrated last Monday evening at the District 1 Senior Spotlight. I would also like to thank the superintendent and other board members for their support, and thank Mrs. Carmen Ellis Watkins, who's a product of the Griffin-Spalding County School System, and the CEO of Run Your Vision for being our guest speaker. This is the second year that she's done this. Also, congratulations to our teacher for preserving this school year. We're almost at the end. Continue to push and finish strong. We appreciate you being our real-life superheroes. I would like to give a personal shout-out to the custodians and nutrition staff. Often you are overlooked, but you are the saviors. You are our VIPs and MVPs. As TIP would say, we could not do this without you. Shout out to Dr. Kennedy on her retirement from the Griffin-Spalding County School System. We thank you for your many years of service and all that you have done during your tenure as Deputy Superintendent. And finally, shout out to all of the retirees across the district. There are several who have dedicated their lives to making our district and our community a better place. We thank you, we honor you, and we wish you well in your next phase. That concludes my board
Just to
members' announcements.
let you know, Mr. Brown, that's what me and Mr. Simmons will sign. These are certificates for the retirees.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Ms. Cook.
Ditto to what Mr. Brown said. All of those are so deserving of accolades. I want to send a shout out to all the seniors in all of our high schools. This has been a unique year for all of you, and you have all been flexible. You have risen to the occasion, and now it's time for all of us to celebrate your accomplishments. The Board of Education looks forward to congratulating you at your graduating ceremonies. And as Dr. Seuss said, oh, the places you will go. You're off to great things, and we congratulate each one of you. Thank you.
Go ahead, see you. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Dawson.
McDonough.
I'd just like to say thank you to all of the teachers, that it's only a few more weeks and you will be having some much needed rest. I am excited that the superintendent is making proposals to not go back into teaching virtual and in classroom at the same time. I can't imagine what that was like, but very, very appreciative. Thank you for all the central office workers that have done what you have done this year.
I have to tell you, I was excited as I came to the meeting from Sun City this afternoon because I got behind 4 school buses. And I was just so excited to be stopped by a school bus, because I know in the fall I'll see buses again. And as a former educator, that means a lot to me. When the buses are running, we're running, and that just brings a lot of comfort to my heart. I also would like to thank all of our teachers that are retiring, that have been in the trenches all year. None of us sitting here can even relate to what you have attempted to do, what you have done and done well. Thank you to all the central office staff for what you have done, getting us through this, and now we're on the other end of it, so to speak. Mr. Wheeler, you have made my day with regard to knowing that our children will have free and reduced lunch for a long time coming. And thank you for your work in that effort. As I mentioned earlier, it's a passion of mine to be sure kids are fed properly and well. Thank you so much. And I will be unable to attend the retirement celebration tomorrow. I told Mr. Simmons earlier that I haven't missed one of those because I know when people attended my retirement celebration, what it meant to me for so many people to be there. But I have an appointment that can't be changed, and I just wish all of you well tomorrow as you go through that celebration because I know it's going to be very special. Thank you to all, and this has been a great meeting. Thank you.
I echo everything the board members have said, and I like to just, I guess, cover them with prayer, the principals at the two high schools and the decision makers on the ticket situation that would be issued. I know they're catching a lot of heat about that. That's a hot topic around this time of year with the situation that we're having to endure. So I really just want to cover them as they deal with, and also the superintendent, because when they call me, I just divert them to the superintendent. And because I feel like that's the appropriate thing to do. And I know board members have been doing that, but we just want to cover them and support them in what decision we have made about graduation and honors program or whatever. We are still abiding by the public health guidelines, the governor's directives as well, and but that's not pleasing to everyone. But we just want to support them, let them know we support them in their effort to address these concerns. With that being said, if there are no further business, I'd like to get a motion to go into executive session. Got a motion by one and second by Mr. Dawes. All in favor? Go ahead.
For the purpose of evaluation.
For the purpose of evaluation of personnel. Thank you, man. That's what we pay you for. All in favor. And let the record show that Mrs. Cook did arrive. We'd like to get that on the record. Can we get a vote on the motion to go in executive session? All right, 5-0. Thank you all.